Hey family, it's Mama Bear Homestead. I'm here to bring you something that has been on my mind as of recently. You know, we are going back and forth whether to move on, sell this place, move on, try to get some land, significant amount of land and a home. And as we go through that, finances, financing, future goals, all of that is coming to a head. I mean, it was kind of already there and things that we worked on, but it's really coming to head now because we're thinking so much about it. So it got me to thinking about financial goals, financial tips, things that you should be thinking about if you are one day trying to have a homestead. If you're like us, you're brand new to trying to start a homestead, start a place. You know, obviously this place, we don't have tons of land. We have a half acre, but I'm blessed. I feel blessed that we have this space to work with. It just takes a little bit more creativity to ensure that you can do all your hopes and dreams on it, right? Now, what I wanted to do today is I came up with 6 financial tips in regards to homesteading, things to think about when you're doing homesteading. And I think that these apply to even if you don't have a homestead, you live in an apartment, you live in a home. These are great financial things to think about, especially if you live in that type of situation and you plan on one day trying to get land, trying to move out of the city, try to move somewhere rural, doing what we're doing with something much smaller. Maybe you have a suburban area, but you're trying to do as much as possible. And or you've already succeeded. You've already got that land. You've got a homestead. But maybe you haven't thought about some of these things on my list. So the number one thing is planning out, right? Planning out is so important to plan out, research, figure out what it is you want to do. It doesn't matter if it's a project. It doesn't matter if it's just a hope and dream of something you want to do. But it's important to plan it out, research it. This can be as far as layout, right? Especially if you're somebody like us, where you're in a location where you're very, limited on what you can do because of space. It's not that you can't do it. You just have to really think about what you're doing. And it's even more important that you think about that layout, the layout of the entire property. See, if you have 40 acres, you might have the same hopes and dreams, the same things you want to incorporate, but you have more space. So at that point, you can, yes, you're thinking it out, you're planning it out, but maybe you're not thinking about the entire overall picture because you know you have the space to grow, you have the space to manipulate things, move things around, change things completely, and you have the freedom to do that. But if you have a smaller space like we have, a half acre, you've got to be creative and if you got to think it through a little bit further as far as long term. What are the short term goals? What are the long-term goals as far as what you envision that property to do for you? And the things that you expect it to do. You know, we want a garden, we want a greenhouse, we want a place for a pool, we want a place for animals to still be able to run in some sort of grass, right? We want to have a compost, we want to have a work area, we need a place for wood cutting, you know, all these different aspects, and making sure that when you have a smaller space that you've allocated space for that and that the layout works, that it makes sense, right? As far as the flow of where you have certain items and it's not just an afterthought and you're like, well, this is the space we have left, so this is where the wood cutting is, and it's not conducive and it's not convenient for you in that way, okay? And sometimes if you have a bigger place and you haven't really thought this through, you just put things willy-nilly and then realize, okay, I didn't think it through enough. This is not the right spot. But because you had all this space, you're like, who cares, right? So I think that planning is important. And with that, budgeting, right? Having a budget with those short and long-term goals. What is the money allocated for each of these projects as you move forward with each of these things that you want to accomplish? What does that look like in regards to your paychecks, the money that's incoming, and how you're doing that? And maybe if you have made the decision to just sell everything, go off grid, there isn't a lot of budget. There isn't a lot of incoming money. And so it's very, very important that you're budgeting and figuring out what you're doing, right? And things come slowly. Things are not overnight. I mean, even if you have money, you have to be careful because if you don't plan it out, you still can mess it up, even though you have money to kind of just throw at it and just do it all, right? But the average family, I would suggest, doesn't do this because a lot of people that decide to do this, yes, they plan, they sell a lot of stuff, right? They get down to the simple things, the immediate things they need, and then they move to a piece of property or land. And a lot of that work, that effort that you see is hands-on effort, hands-on projects, with used, recycled items, free items. And a lot of it is not because money's coming in and they're just able to go buy, like, let's say, all this wood to do a project, right? And so you're savvy in the thinking of how you're completing projects and doing things. And that all comes to planning and preparing, and budget, whatever your budget is a huge, huge piece of that. Now, next thing I have is one project at a time. I got a piece of advice from a subscriber when I'm like one of my first couple videos, and they said, hey, you know, it's very, very important. I can see your excitement. I can see you're so excited to do all these projects, but it's very, very important that you concentrate on the project that you're going to do at hand, and you execute that one project beautifully. You don't move on to other projects. If you're going to start the greenhouse, you finish the greenhouse from start to finish. You don't move on to the next thing, right? Yes, there's times that you're working on multiple projects at the same time. Yes. Is that possible? Yes. But when you're talking about a big project, a big thing that you're trying to, you know, get started, that it behooves you to concentrate on that, concentrate your budget on that, your money on that, your time on that, the planning, the effort, the research on that, so that that project, that thing that you're doing, turns out the best way that it can. Financially, it turns out the best way it can. If things happen and all of a sudden the budget's blown or this and that, hopefully you have contingencies and you financially just prepared mentally for that project and what it's going to take to get that project done, and how it can go left, and what are those things that could make it go left, and what does that mean money wise. And if you do that and concentrate on that, then there's less throwing money at different things, there's less confusion, there's less of not finishing the project in the first place, or you finish it, but you don't finish it in the way of your hopes and dreams, right? You just throw something together and you're like, okay, good, that's done. The greenhouse is done, but it's not really done in the way that you wanted it to be done, right? And then in the long run, that might not work for you, because then now you have a greenhouse that, one, doesn't look the way you want it to look, is not going to function and work the way you want. And if you didn't plan, think about it, it might even be in a location that's not conducive for you, or you made it in a way that's not conducive for the sun and sunlight and the whole point of a greenhouse. So one project at a time and kill the game, right? One project at a time and kill the game. Next thing I have is build up the self-sufficiency, right? The whole point is, if you can go about relying on yourself, that takes you away from relying on other people, and hopefully money wise is saving you money, right? Because a lot of times when we are depending on other people, it ends up costing us more. Because we're paying for the service, we're paying for somebody else to do something for us. And you know, meat, for example, or food, for example, you know, you're paying the gas to go get it, and you're paying for the comfort of having to not deal with anything that has to do with the animal, with killing the animal, with processing the animal, with packaging the animal, and you're paying for that entire process to be able to just walk to a store and get that packaged meat. And half the time you're not even getting a quality product. It's got all types of preservatives or all types of extra stuff added to it that you have no idea what you're eating. And so if you move your family towards the mindset of self-sufficiency, whether that's power, whether that's water, whether that's your heat source, whether that's food, growing food, raising food, any of those things, that stuff matters, because all of those little projects that move you towards being self-reliant, self-sufficient, helps you get away from dependency on somebody else or an entity or a whoever, right? And if you're providing for yourself, a lot of times that is going to be less money. Now, at first, when you're setting up projects and you're setting up things, is there cost involved? Absolutely. But if you go back to planning it out and budgeting it out, it's not so bad. And that money comes back later over time of you setting it up and then doing that thing yourself. Over time, you end up saving money. So some of those projects will cost, like say you're setting up solar for your whole house, and you have to get those batteries, and you have to get all the pieces right. And so yes, there's some cost involved, but the benefit, you know, to be able to say you're completely off grid in regards to power, you have your own power, and later you can add to it and increase it and make it better. And at first you have that cost, but over time, just the benefit of knowing that you're not dependent on something. Something goes left, there's power outages, there's blackouts, there's whatever happens, you've got power, you've got set up, and you're able to depend on yourselves, right? And if something goes wrong, it's yourselves, you're depending on yourselves. And over time, that's possibly saving you money versus like depending on an electricity company and having to depend on, you have to pay whatever it is that they say you need to pay to be able to light your home and all this stuff, right? And so the more you work towards self-sufficiency, I know a lot of homesteads that are 100% on the grid and have zero plan to ever be off grid. They do not plan for off grid. And so it's crazy to me because you are living in this lifestyle of homesteading. So you must have a thought process of like, you know, doing stuff for yourself and all that's there. But when it comes to like living on the grid, you know, they're on water from the city. Maybe they have a well or maybe they have a creek, but they're on the city water, or they're on still some kind of electricity, or they're on, you know, power. You know, they're dependent on that stuff still, right? And to me, that's fine. I've always said for a long time that I wanted a home that was a piece of property, land, possibly on grid or aspects of it on grid, but the game plan is always to build it up for no grid, to either make the decision one day to completely shut it off, or if the decision is made for us, i.e. something happens, right, blackouts, whatever, it's okay, and we're dependent on ourselves, and you just shift gears. And so it bothers me when I hear people say they have a homestead, they have a well, but the well is hooked up to electricity and they don't have a backup way to get their water. They have no pumps, they have no hand pumps, they have no generators, they have zero ways to get to their water if grid goes down. And to me, that's crazy, right? So I think it's important that you work towards self-sufficiency, really take a look at what you have, what you're doing, and how do you shift that stuff towards self-sufficiency. Even if you're on the grid, be on the grid, but be building up stuff for the day that you're not, and that things won't change, your quality of life won't change. Next thing I have is recycle and reuse. Can't say this enough, right? I think what we're planning to do is we have a trash bill, right? We have a trash service. They come get the trash. And we are seriously, and then in the next few months to come, going to be shutting it off and then figuring out our trash ourselves, because there's so much stuff that can be reused and recycled within your home. I'm not talking about you have a recycle bin and you fill that up and then we just don't have a trash service, but we go and drop off the recycling somewhere. No, I'm talking about everything stays on the property. That means the food is separated, it goes into a composting, any other pieces that eventually can be put into composting, papers, cardboard, whatever. But some of that stuff is used for other things, in the garden, in the chicken coops or animals, right? Bedding, whatever. There's so many things. All the jugs and containers that can be kept, water can be kept in, right? For flushing toilets for our septic system, or watering plants, or whatever it is. There's a ton of uses for containers, whether it's to hold water, whether it's to sow plants in and sow seeds in, whether it's to, put under a leak, right? Changing oil in a car, or doing some kind of mechanical stuff and you're trying to, catch oil, movement of gas. Like, there's just a ton of ways that a container can be reused and repurposed, right? And the more that you learn about that and actually start doing self-sufficiency, the less waste you're going to have anyway. Because if you're shifting away from preserved foods, let's say, and packaged foods, and you're trying to raise food on your property, or you're trying to grow food, or you're trying to preserve food in jars, you're going to have less waste anyway. Because if you're bringing in less waste, you're going to have less waste to then reuse and recycle, okay? But everything has a purpose, and people who homestead, number one tip I learned a long time ago was do not get rid of anything when you recycle or when you homestead and you're depending on yourself and you're trying to build towards self-sufficiency. There's a million uses for all these different containers and different packaging and all this stuff, right? And some of this stuff can be burned, some of it cannot because of different chemicals and things that's on it, but there's a place for everything. Everything has a way that it can be reused, okay? Next thing I have is getting rid of debt. So the biggest thing is moving forward with a future where you have zero debt, you've paid off your cars, your RV, your ATV, any of the equipment that you have on your farm, the farm itself, the piece of property itself, the house itself, the land itself, paying that stuff off, and just having the tax be the one thing that you have to worry about moving forward in the future. Now, this is not the easiest thing to do, but you start little. You post it on the wall, you put up all your debt, and you come up with a game plan to pay all that up, from the littlest debt all the way up to the house, the land, everything, right? And you start paying that stuff off. When you have no debt and stuff's paid off, you give yourself a ton of options, okay? And there's a freedom that comes with that, knowing that you don't owe anybody any money, okay? And so paying off debt's important, especially if things go left, and this whole idea of where they want to take us one day in regards to, you will owe nothing and be happy, that type of mentality of taking property and taking things from people. And so you want to be ready for that battle when it comes, okay? And part of that is being able to verbally say, well, I don't owe anything, right? And then stuff like tax, figuring out how you're going to work that, how you're going to do that, and what that battle looks like if you come down to that day where things are left, right? And I won't go too much down that rabbit hole on this channel. That's really what my Patreon's about. And if you didn't know, if you're not following me over at Mama Bear Prepping, I did start a Patreon account as well, Mama Bear Prepping. The link to that is over at Mama Bear Prepping's my main channel. But on that Patreon is where I can really go down those rabbit holes. So if you're interested in that type of thing, join me over there for a good time. The last thing I have is future earnings and income. How are you going to make money, monetary value later? It doesn't matter if that's whatever that looks like. How do you make that income to be able to provide for yourself? Pay your property tax, for example, get things. Yes, you can barter, trade, all that stuff, but what on your property, or what do you have that would be able to make money one day, right? So that your space, your homesteading space, has a way to make money. Is it selling eggs from the chickens, eggs from the quail? Is it breeding small animals? Is it breeding rabbits and selling rabbits, selling meat? Maybe you have animals that you breed and you sell that, and you're selling that meat. You're raising meat to be sold. Maybe you're hunting meat that you then sell. Maybe is it the wood on your property? You have acres and acres of wood, and so you're selling wood. Is it your skill set that you're selling? You know how to fix everything, or you're a builder, or you're a sewer, or you're a quilter, whatever it is, you're a healer. What is your skill set, and what can you then help people with? Maybe you make tons of tinctures and salves and you're a healer, and that's what you plan on trying to make money on. Maybe you make soap, candles, other products that would be beneficial in the future, then you plan to sell those, right? It's a skill set. What else did I put? Maybe it's the fruits and vegetables, right? You're growing a garden, you have fruits and vegetables, and you're selling that. You have fruit trees and you're selling the fruit from those fruit trees. Like, what is it that will bring income to your property, okay? A way for you to make income later, utilizing that property. In case you don't have a 9-to-5 job, you don't have some sort of retirement check coming in, whatever the case may be, what is the income piece of this? And if you have a homestead and you haven't really thought about that, think about that, because you might be living somewhere where there's a ton of opportunity in regards to making money in the future, or even now, that you're not thinking about. I laugh at all these Instagram videos that are these reels, man. Me and hubby, probably the other night, we probably stayed up for 2 hours watching these Instagram reels about eggs, right? People acting like they're drug dealers, but with eggs, right? Because of the whole egg controversy and the problem with eggs, and people can't get eggs, or they can find eggs, but it's $10, a flat or whatever, right? And so they're hilarious, these reels. I mean, I cannot get enough of these egg reels, and people feeling like they're, famous and rich just because you have chickens in your backyards. But you see how that dynamic changes by just having your space that's a homestead, that you call home, that you're raising animals, or that you're doing things and you're trying to be self-sufficient. And look, when bad stuff happens, because it's bad, it's not a good situation, but it makes people, it validates you that you are moving in the right direction with this stuff. So if you are new to homesteading and you're following me because you're new to homesteading, or you don't have a homestead, you haven't started, you want to start it, Hopefully I'm motivating you to do that. Hopefully if you have a homestead, I'm getting something going in your brain. And of course, share your wealth of knowledge. I love learning from those folks that have been homesteading for a really long time, the different aspects of homesteading, different things to think about, different things to do. I absolutely cannot get enough of that. So continue to share with me. I'll continue to share with you. And I'll see you guys next week on the next video. Take care. Bye.